Welcome back. Welcome back, everyone. We are so excited that you are back with us in full, in class. Walking around today, it looks like you've settled in already. It's like you've never been away. We're so pleased you're back with us. I just want to remind you of a couple, before we do our assembly, just a couple of things that we need to remind you about. I've been around today, around classes, but these are just things that I need you to remember. We are asking you to stay with your class this half term until Easter, just because we want to keep your group as small as possible to make sure the transmission risk is as low as possible, but also to make sure as few children as possible need to isolate if we ever get a positive case. I want you to keep washing and sanitising your hands regularly, as often as your teacher tells you to. It should be as you go out to break, when you come back in from break. You know how to do it. I don't need to tell you, you're better than me at that. Keeping your distance, well, only from the other class. When you're in your classroom, then you're fine. And obviously just make sure that if your teacher is staying a little bit away from you, particularly in the older years, and is wearing a mask, you might need to keep your distance a bit there. But actually, when you're in your classroom and with your class outside, you can play. Just make sure that you wash your hands, and when you're playing, not touch each other too much. One of the things that we always have a bit of an issue with is you keeping hold of your things because you're so busy playing, which is what we like, but we're not able to have that big basket full of lost property at the moment in a central place. So please make sure that at the end of the day, you check you've got your jumper, check you've got your coat, and check you've got your water bottle if you're taking it home. You can leave your water bottles here, but make sure you put your names on them. And also just a reminder about the one-way system. So if your teacher tells you to go one way around the building, to make sure you do that, not bumping into other classes. And one of the most important things is whatever your teachers and your anyone in your classroom, basically, if they ask you to do a certain thing, we really do need to follow those rules to keep everyone safe, because sometimes things might have changed around the school you don't know about, and the teacher's asking you to do a certain thing to make sure that everyone's safe along the corridors and that kind of thing. Right, all that's over. You're great at that. I know that we talked last half term about respect and walking around. The respect you're showing your teachers and each other was great this morning, so please keep that up. Obviously, gratitude is our half-termly value, and I will be coming around later in the week with some stickers for those of you that have sent me the sheet. It's not too late, you can still send it in to me. About the things that you're going to be grateful for, but I really want you to show your gratitude to your teachers and all of the staff in your classrooms by, saying thank you, being polite, and also helping each other out and being kind. And that just shows how much you care about the people that are around you, and that's the most important thing at the moment. Going to do a really nice book today. It's called Mrs. Noah's Pockets, and it's a message of hope, and that is what we need at the moment. We need a message of hope because we've all been through really quite a difficult time in the last year. And you have done a great job at home. You've done a great job, those of you that have been in school. But also, it does feel sometimes like it's going on forever, doesn't it? But there's always hope in every situation. And I'm sure if you know anything about the story of Noah's Ark, you will know the biggest amount of hope out of everybody. This beautiful picture, it just says simply, could be in Manchester, it rained. Not the kind of rain that comes in a shower then passes. This rain came from the sky, dark as a bruise, falling hard and fast, beating the earth, washing down tracks, making streams of pathways and rivers of roads. Goodness, it does sound like Manchester, doesn't it? But it was more than that. It was a lot heavier than that for a lot longer. Mr. Noah stood on a hill, saw the water rising, and began to build an ark. This, he said, will be the ideal time to tidy up the world a bit, the ideal time to get rid of some of those more troublesome creatures. By day, Mr. Noah would draw out plans, hammer and saw at wood, steadily building the biggest boat the world had ever seen. By night, he sat in a corner and made lists, one for all the animals who would sail with the ark, two of every kind, and one of the troublesome creatures that Mr. Noah wished to leave behind. At the time, Mrs. Noah watched Mr. Noah. She saw the plans. She watched as he worked. She saw the lists. She smiled. What she's plotting. Look, there he is in his sou'wester. Looks like he's used to the wet, doesn't it? She took out her sewing machine and she began to stitch. She snipped and she threaded and she tackled and she tucked and she stitched. How lovely, thought Mr. Noah. Mrs. Noah is making curtains for the windows of my ark. Mrs. Noah just smiled. Do you get the feeling that Mrs. Noah has got a little bit of a bigger plan than curtains for the window? I think I do. She sounds like she knows what she's doing, doesn't she? Oh, look at that beautiful picture there. When the ark was finished, Mr. Noah gathered together animals from all around the world, 2 by 2, and took them into the shelter, out of the rain. Mrs. Noah went for one last walk, wading through water into the heart of the Mythico Wood, on errands of her own. There she is, battling against those elements and that deep, deep water. At last, all were gathered inside the ark. It heaved with animals, large and small. Mr. Noah had been too busy and important to notice that there were no curtains at the window. Mrs. Noah wore a brand new coat, stitched and snipped and tucked and turned, with a hood and a cape and very deep pockets. Lots of pockets. All people need pockets. What would we do without pockets, everybody? Eh? Need you somewhere to put your things and your hands when it's cold, don't you? Look at how the rain has affected the world there, those beautiful big waves. And still it rained. The hollows of the land began to fill. Lakes formed in valleys. The water rose higher and higher until it tickled the base of the boat where it rested on the hill. The water lifted it. They began to float. Mr. Noah cut the ropes that held the ark at anchor and away, and then they drifted. I guess they're not really sure where they're going, are they, at this point? They're not sure where that water is going to take them. But that is what his ark looked like by the time he finished. The rain beat on the roof, great rods of battering rain. All the animals and Mr. Noah and the children sheltered in the dry of the ark. Mrs. Noah stood on the prow, wearing her hood up, umbrella in hand, watching the dolphins and mermaids racing the waves. There they are. Gosh, look at all those animals on that. It must have been very crowded. Every evening, after all the animals had been cared for, when the owls began their evensong, Mr. Noah would fall asleep. Mrs. Noah would gather the children round and tell them tales of dragons and unicorns, griffin and phoenix, centaurs and jackalopes, wultbingers, and all manner of things. Now and again, Mr. Noah would wake and mutter, "Ha, bah, unicorns! Ha, troublesome creatures!" The children sometimes thought they could see things moving deep in Mrs. Noah's pockets. Maybe it was just a trick of the light. And one morning, everyone woke to silence. The rain had stopped. The clouds began to roll away. The sky was a most beautiful cornflower blue. Again, Manchester in the summer, hey? And there, deep beneath the sea, look, all those animals. Everyone waited, everyone watched as Mr. Noah sent out a raven to search for land. Later that day, the raven came back, no land anywhere. It seemed that the world had drowned in all the rain. The ark sailed on, and Mr. Noah sent out a dove. High, high in the clear blue sky, they all watched until she disappeared. Much later that day, as the sun coloured the sea to glow with gold, over the water she came. In her beak was a small twig of green olive. And that's a really good sign of peace, but also of land ahead. She must have got that from somewhere, and that is where, look at the rainbow. The next day, they followed the dove until the ark came to rest on the tip of a mountain. All the animals spilled out onto the land as Mr. Noah watched and smiled. So much tidier without those troublesome ones. Mrs. Noah, her coat tails flapping in the warm wind, wandered away from the ark into a wood that grew close by. What do you think she's got in those pockets? What do you think she might have put in there? Here, one at a time, she emptied her pockets, being very careful to lift the creatures out, setting them free 2 by 2 into the new land. You can see the unicorn at the bottom, that troublesome creature. There she had released every troublesome creature back into the world. What a beautiful story. It's a message of hope, isn't it? Because even in the most difficult of storms, even when you think all is lost and no land is there, there's always hope, and you've got to look for those little pockets of hope. The fact that Noah kept sending out his birds to try and find land. We're always just trying to send out our messages to our friends and to our teachers to just look for those messages of hope. Some days you might feel that you're full of hope, and some days you might not, and you might need a little bit of support. So over this half term, we are going to focus on your well-being and also the well-being of our staff as well, because we've all had a really quite a difficult time, but we're also all really lucky because we're all one big family at St. John's. And what I want you to know is that you can speak to your teacher, you can speak to people around you. It could be that some of the children around you are finding hope a bit easier to deal with that day and can give you some of theirs. And it's really important when we're faced with challenges to have that hope. Sometimes the challenges we face are really difficult, and it's really important to stay hopeful and get help if you need to. Get help from your friends. You can also put messages in your worry boxes on your prayer tables, or you can take see Mrs. Marston or I on the playground, or a teacher that you trust and that you know you can talk to, just to try and stay as hopeful as you can, and also to offload those feelings when you're not feeling great. That's what we want you to be able to do, is to kind of feel really like you trust everyone around you, or certain people around you that you can trust to talk to about your feelings that you've got inside. But also, it's not about saying there are no challenges, come on everyone, we've got to be jolly. It's about knowing that despite the challenge, there is going to be something good at the end. There's going to be that rainbow, just like Noah got. There's going to be the rainbow at the end of this experience, where we know that these difficult times have finished. And we always say this word, this too shall pass. Things like this do come and go, and this too shall pass. And at some point we'll look back and go, do you remember that time that we had to learn from home? So I just want you to remember that message of hope from Noah. I also am going to leave you with your teacher to pause this now. I'd like you to have a little think about these questions, because actually Noah and his family and all the animals that he'd saved were in the ark for 40 days. That's what it says in the Bible. I want you to think about that in terms of what you've been through. As a class, how do you think they stayed hopeful? How do they keep busy? And think about your experience that you've had over the last few weeks when you've had to isolate. So pause the video now. These are dream catchers, and actually the ones on the left are from our reception class. They made them last year and I love them. They're absolutely beautiful, and they're such a symbol of hope. They catch all of our hopes and dreams and all the things that are good in our lives, all the things we've got gratitude for. So I thought I'd do you some little pictures of these dream catchers, because they'd be a really good project for home, or you might have time to do it in your class the next couple of weeks, to really catch those hopes and dreams and focus on what is good and what we are grateful for. One last thing. It is not a surprise that I chose a story about a strong woman today. Mrs. Noah was the one that saved all of those unusual and fantastic creatures. And she did that because she was a strong, confident, powerful person who could look at what was needed and just get on with it. And that is what we celebrate on International Women's Day. We celebrate those women who have not listened and thought, oh, I'll better do that because that's what I'm meant to be doing. They've thought, this is what we should be doing. This is what is needed. And even if it's difficult and I have to make my own enormous coat with big pockets, I am going to do that to save what I know is right and to behave in that kind of way. So Mrs. Noah, to me, today was that symbol for International Women's Day. She was somebody that could be relied upon to do the right thing, even though it was quite tricky and difficult. And that is what we celebrate on International Women's Day. I've also got a book here that I think some of you might have at home, called Good Night Stories for Rebel Girls. And I did pick a couple out from here, but I'm not sure we've got time to do that today. I will pass this around the school, though. There's some fabulous people in here. There's people that have celebrated how amazing they are as women through their singing. We've got people who are educators. There's a great one about a spy that's one of my favourite, who actually was so brave and so incredible behind enemy lines. She's a great one. Ruth Harkness, who's an explorer. That is a particularly good story. And also one of my favourites, I did have it here. We have people I haven't even heard of as well, and then people who are really famous. We've got Virginia Woolf, who's a writer. We've got some painters in here, and we've also got You'll probably recognise her, Simone Biles, the gymnast. So in this book, there's stories of wonderful women who have thought, like Marie Curie, what can I do to make this world better? And whatever people say, even if they say I can't do it, I am going to do it, and I'm going to make sure that I use my skills and talents, and I'm going to stand up for what's right and use all of the God-given talents that I've got to make sure I make the world a better place. And that is what International Women's Day is about. So as we put our hands together now, I want you to think about all of those strong women that you know. Either they might be celebrities, they might be famous, they might be your next door neighbour, it might be your mum or your grandma. Those women that have really shown you how to do the right thing and how to be strong. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Loving God, we pray for women and girls today, especially those who struggle with inequality. Inspire us to speak and work for equality and justice so that each person is able to fulfill their potential. Amen. And some of the children in your Key Stage 2, you might want to talk about what equality is and think about how that looks in your world. Key Stage 1 in early years, I want you to maybe find some pictures and have a little look at this book and find some stories that you like that show how brilliant some people have been in their lifetimes. Have a lovely week. Once again, welcome back. We're so pleased to have you on school grounds, enjoying all of the lovely areas that you've got to play in. So have a nice week, look after each other, and I'll see you soon.